All right, welcome back to the Powers on Sports podcast. You just heard my thoughts on the Major League Baseball trade deadline, wild action all around the league. If you heard my episode last week, I told you that San Diego Padres would be big players for Mr. Soto and such. And we also gave you some thoughts on the Miami Dolphins tampering situation. So what more than happy to welcome our first guest to the podcast, a regular here. You will be seeing him many different platforms here in the next, starting here at the end of August, covering his college football for Compass Media. Of course, sideline reporter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, starting with preseason in about a week or so. Mr. TJ Rives, welcome back.
Always good to be with you there, Mr. Powers. And do we have some things to talk about? I know it's not quite football season yet, but man, we have a lot of news and a lot of different stuff. So let's roll up the sleeves and get after it.
It's been a crazy week of sports news. We're doing this on Tuesday night or Wednesday night.
Right.
And it's only Wednesday. It's crazy. We've had some passings of some legends. Let's start there. Two legends that have passed in the last several days. First off, Vin Scully Tuesday night, 94 years old, the iconic broadcaster, baseball guy. I want to hit him first because, again, this is your wheelhouse. This is what you do for a living, have done for a living for many years, very successfully. Just your general thoughts about Vin Scully in the broadcasting world.
I don't know that we can do it adequately in just a few minutes or even a half hour. I sum it up like this. I've said this other places. I'll say it here on Powers on Sports. If you're talking about born to do something, Vin Scully born to call baseball on the radio, and then later, obviously, paint the pictures with the TV picture with TV broadcasts. But iconic. You can't think of the Dodgers without thinking of him. 67 years, 7 decades, going from Jackie Robinson, hello, to Don Drysdale, Sandy Koufax, Pee Wee Reese, move forward to Steve Garvey, and Fernando Valenzuela, move up to Oral Hershiser, Mike Piazza, and now in the present with the likes of Clayton Kershaw and some of the other present day Dodgers to have spanned that 7 decades. It's just incredible. And we cannot emphasize enough that he was the soundtrack. If you were a Southern California sports fan, he was your soundtrack every night in the summer because the games weren't on TV in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Right.
You largely were not seeing Dodger games except the ABC Monday Night Baseball game or the NBC Saturday Game of the Week. You're a little older like I am. Yes, locally, they began to show some Dodger games here and there in the 70s or in the 80s. But by and large, to find out what the Dodgers were up to, you were either at the stadium on a ticket or listening to Vin Scully. So
even more importantly, you were in the stadium listening to Vin Scully.
Oh, yeah. That's another good point, too. And listen to him on your way home from the stadium in the car. For the recap, or if you're leaving like Dodger fans in the 6th inning, show up in the 2nd inning and leave in the 6th inning. But in any event, just a class guy, a statesman. And how about he was still working games at 88 years of age? 88, all the way up until 2016. Yes. So again, not unlike those that are gifted. Again, you've got a sister that's an educator. My wife's an educator. Some of these people are just born to teach or convey. You're born to be a doctor, a physician, a surgeon. You're born to be a lawyer. You're born to be a conductor in the orchestra. You're born to do something. He was born to be a baseball announcer.
And again, you and I are pretty close in age. So, kind of our wheelhouse was the 80s. And I mean, he probably had two of the iconic, forget baseball calls, sports calls of all time within a 2-year span. You had the Mets in 86 and then the Gibson home run in 88 to win it for the Dodgers. Just the ability on the spot, in the moment when it happens, to drop the perfect word, the perfect phrase, and most importantly, know when to shut up.
Well, yeah, especially on TV, and let the pictures tell the story. And the Gibson thing, one of the biggest misnomers is that was game 1. It was not game 7 to win the World Series. It was game 1. And I'll say this to you, it's always fascinating to watch that highlight. And at the time that we're doing this, ESPN is re-showing that entire game on Wednesday night as we release the podcast from beginning to end, game 1 of the 88 World Series, Dodgers A's. And it is amazing to watch that Gibson moment where they were in dire straits. They were losing the whole last part of the game. Dennis Eckersley was basically unhittable as the closer. And just right out of Hollywood, right down the road, here comes Kirk Gibson hobbling to the plate to hit the home run. But when he hits the home run, you can see out the outfield pavilion of Dodger Stadium how many people are in the parking lot with the red lights of the brake lights and had left the game and are listening to Vin Scully maybe on the radio, although he's doing the game on NBC at that point. But I mean, it's incredible. And let us not forget, he also did football and golf for CBS for many years. He did the NFL on CBS. Again, I'm a little older. The famous catch, Joe Montana to Dwight Clark, is Vin Scully on the call on CBS when the 49ers beat the Cowboys, went on to win their first dynasty. Super Bowl, started their dynasty. Absolutely. Vin Scully on the call of the NFC title game for that moment. So again, iconic, that guy.
And last thing on him, and we'll move on to Bill Russell. Of voices in the last 100 years, forget about what politics, TV. He is probably in the top 5 voices that anybody in this world in the United States of America would recognize. Walter Cronkite, Vin Scully. You know, you pick whoever your favorite voice is, but if you heard that voice the last 100 years, he's in the top 5.
Yeah, I again, we cannot oversell the millions and millions and millions that were hanging on whatever this guy had to say, especially on the radio when he built the empire, and then millions. And keep in mind now, when he was doing the World Series on NBC in the 80s, there's 40 million people watching. Let me say that again. They now struggle to get 7, 8, 10 million. There were 40 million people watching. It's incredible how many more people were watching TV. Like, for example, the 86 Mets Red Sox series that you referenced, it was being beaten by NBC's lineup, including the Thursday night lineup of The Cosby Show, Family Ties. I'm speaking your language here, and LA Law. Cheers and LA Law that were on. That was beating the World Series because they had 40 million people watching while the World Series had 35 million people watching. So he really was that big of a deal, calling the sport of baseball even nationally for so many years. Very true.
All right, let's pivot to Bill Russell, another icon who passed away over the weekend. 88 years old. Again, both these guys lived such great lives, and the great thing is, it sounds like both of them kind of died of natural cause. There wasn't a sudden passing. They kind of died peacefully and all that stuff from all indications. But Bill Russell, the scrutiny he had to endure as a black athlete in the 50s and 60s in a tough town of Boston, which was not known to be the most sensitive to the black athletes. Just your thoughts on Bill Russell. He's never going to be a numbers guy, but the ultimate winner.
Well, yeah, but the ultimate number is 11 championships. Who's ever going to win 11 NBA championships again in their career, much less 6 in a row, 9 out of 10 years in the 1960s as the player. And he was even the player coach. How about you win 11 and 2 of them, you're the player coach for the Boston Celtics. And as you mentioned, you were kinder. I mean, Boston, notoriously racist city in the 60s and 70s during civil rights. And here was Bill Russell, iconic, along with a couple of the other Celtics, Sam Jones, once escaped.
John Thompson played with him.
John Thompson, the elder, played for them, but JoJo White became a prominent player in the late 60s and the early 70s too. So you had civil rights and racial tension and all of that going on as the backdrop, and the Celtics won all the time. And again, the NBA was not as prominent. They struggled to get the games on network TV. The games were not regularly on television anywhere, but Russell, iconic for a lot of reasons. Civil rights movement. He obviously met with and marched with Martin Luther King Jr.
Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali back in the day.
Aided Muhammad Ali and Ali's court challenge to the Supreme Court to not have to go to the Vietnam War. Very socially conscious at the same time, and just a great ambassador for the sport and the iconic Celtics. Again, you talk about dynasties. 9 championships in 10 years. That is, there's only one better is if you win them all. If you're 10 for 10 on that.
And he also won 2 national championships at San Francisco, an Olympic gold medal.
Correct.
And won his final, I think I heard this stat right, the final 21 elimination games of his career. He was 21-0.
They never lost an elimination game with Bill Russell at the end. And he owned Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt
That's the other
Chamberlain
part
was
of it,
obviously
yes.
the other major center and star of the 60s and the early 70s, and the Lakers never beat the Celtics. They could never beat Bill Russell and the Celtics. And certainly Celtic fans will be the first one to tell you, well, yeah, Bakuzi, and what about Havlicek and the other guys that were with him? Sure, there were other guys that were with him, but Russell was the guy going head-to-head with Wilt Chamberlain. And Wilt has amazing numbers, to your point. 50 points a game. Yep. He averaged 50 points a game. Wilt would regularly have 50 20s. Everybody talks about triple doubles. How about a 50-20 where you have 50-something points and 20-something rebounds in a game? And he would regularly do that, but they couldn't beat the Celtics. He and Jerry West and Elgin Baylor and anybody else that was involved with the Lakers, and I know we're going in the way back for the younger generation, but anybody from the 60s and the 70s with the Lakers and the Lakers-Celtics rivalry, they continually could not get past the Celtics for the championship. So Russell, with such a great legacy, and they now have the MVP award, is named after him, and icon, no doubt, an icon.
I saw another note too. When Wilt Chamberlain was the first guy to make $100,000 in the NBA, so as soon as that deal happens, Russell threatens to retire to Red Auerbach. You're gonna pay me $1 more than what Wilt Chamberlain got paid, and he got paid $100,001.
Exactly. How much is it important to you to put another banner or 2 or 5 up in the top of the old Boston Garden and watch that happen? And again, it's amazing to say 9 championships in 10 years, 11 in his tenure. The Boston Celtics have one NBA championship in the last 36 years now. They were so dominant for so long, but if you end with Bird, Parrish, and McHale's 86 title against the Houston Rockets, you include Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce winning in 2008, that's it.
I know.
36 years, one title after they were so dominant in the 60s, the 70s, and the early to mid 80s.
No, you're right. It's just crazy how 2 of these iconic figures in 2 different sports. One was a on the field player, and one never played a minute of inning in his life. Crazy. One other note about Vin Scully, and we'll wrap it up. Vin Scully called the World Series at 25 years old. Youngest guy ever to call a World Series game at 25. And I know Joe Buck did it pretty young, but he wasn't 25 when he did it. And a guy who's grown up in the business, the pressure that would probably have been for a guy like you at 25 years old. Hey, TJ, you're going to call the Super Bowl at 25.
You're not going to be ready for that. I agree. It takes a special talent, and again, born to do this. You just got the feeling, and it's obvious that he was still on his game into his 80s. Just God-given ability to communicate, and with the words and with everything flowing.
Absolutely. All right, you listen to the Powers on Sports podcast. TJ Rives, sideline reporter, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, podcast host, Three Dog Thursday coming up. We got a bunch of different podcasts getting ready to unveil in the fall here. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Again, going to be working some college football here this fall. Has a great boxing podcast. So I'll let you plug away.
I have way too many hats on right now. We've been doing a lot of boxing. We got college football coming nationally with Compass Media. I'm excited to do some games with them. I'll work the Texas game as my first one in September. Okay. I'll work a game that people might be interested in, Alabama, Texas A&M on October 8th. Some people might be interested on that. So I'm letting you in on that on Powers on Sports, and some other games too as the year goes on. But it's a lot of fun. And, we're going to obviously mention the Buccaneers a bunch. Whenever I'm on anywhere, we're talking Buccaneers. And on the day that we're doing this, Tom Brady turned 45 years old. The GOAT
Happy birthday, Tom.
45 years of age. Quick stat nugget for the Powers on Sports podcast. The oldest starting quarterback in NFL history. You have the name. We talked about this off the air.
One Steve DeBerg.
Steve DeBerg, former Buccaneer quarterback, former 49er quarterback. How about Steve DeBerg was the backup to Joe Montana on the 81 Super Bowl team before he later came to Tampa Bay. So Steve DeBerg, who was in San Francisco, in Tampa a couple of times, and with the Chiefs, he eventually went to the Atlanta Falcons as a veteran journeyman backup, hung on there with the Dan Reeves Falcons that went to the Super Bowl, the 98 Super Bowl season.
Yep.
Steve DeBerg started a game at 44 years, 290 something days. That's the oldest player in NFL history to ever start at quarterback until TB12, God willing, starts the September 11th game with the Dallas Cowboys. He will then become the oldest at 45 years and like 2 months, something like that, or 70 days, whatever it is. Incredible. Incredible to have lasted this time.
Most people think George Blanda, but he was a backup and never started. He played in relief at 48, but he never started.
Right, I did look for the Raiders. He played in a game as the backup quarterback at 48 years of age. In 1975, he came in as a reserve in an Oakland Raiders game. But the oldest to ever start is DeBerg, and now it may be about to be the GOAT. And after the way he finished last season, let's just hope he picks up where he left off. I don't know how long this is going to last. People keep talking to me about, can he keep it up? We don't know. Will the elbow hold up? Will the shoulder hold up? Will the offensive line be able to protect him from taking hits where he gets hurt? I don't know any of those answers, but it's going to be a lot of fun to find out, my friend.
I would have loved to have been in that locker room today to see what kind of birthday cake or gag gifts that guy got.
You saw Fournette. You saw Fournette put the GOAT cake on social media, and I did a little research because I was doing other work. That the GOAT cake was vanilla and it had guacamole or avocado nasty inside of it. Oh. And the woman worked for 4 hours to get the 3D GOAT. It's on Leonard Fournette's social media to get the 3D GOAT to kind of raise up off the sheet cake. And I don't know that Tom Brady even touched it.
Probably didn't.
And it does say on the cake, he put this on social media, he had a little sticker, a little sign beside the cake that said 100-year-old man next to it about the GOAT. So they're joking around with Tom Brady on that. And let's see as the Buccaneers unfold here in the preseason, what it looks like, and get ready for year number 3 with Brady.
All right, let's go to another quarterback issue that's kind of percolating here. The NFL finally, the judge with the Desean Watson case finally made a decision, suspended him 6 games on Monday morning. The NFL had 3 days to decide if they were going to appeal. We were recording this Wednesday night. On Wednesday afternoon late, the NFL decided they are going to appeal the 6-game suspension. And then, so now Goodell has a choice of who he wants to. And again, this is all negotiated with the Players Association. So Goodell's not stepping out of bounds here. He has the authority to do this. And we'll talk about some of the possible scenarios of what happens if he does do this. But the NFL is going to appeal the ruling, try to get more games. I think the sentiment I think we've heard the sentiment around the country. They think it's a little light. Most people probably think it's a little light. The judge in her ruling basically agreed with the NFL and said, yeah, he did a lot of bad things. She used some pretty explicit language, predatorial conduct and such. Just your thoughts, Desean Watson only getting 6 games.
Well, it doesn't seem like it's enough, but again, I'm not involved in it. The NFL will rule. When you're talking about Ezekiel Elliott getting a 6-game suspension originally for 1 allegation, Ben Roethlisberger originally got 8 games, knocked back to 6 games for 1 allegation. Neither one of them criminally charged. And here you've got 30 allegations, and it's only 6 games.
And he settled with 25 of them.
Yeah, and it's amazing how this is all unfolded. And now the next part of the soap opera is that appeal actually going to get heard? Do they work something else out? I have to believe this is a year-long suspension. That's what the NFL wants. Otherwise, what are we parsing 6 games versus 8 games versus 10 games? So let's see. It's not going to be over with right now by this weekend or next week. The appeal's going to take time if there is an appeal. Now, interestingly, just real quick, they were trying to negotiate some kind of worked out agreement on number of games and couldn't come to an agreement, and the arbiter ruled 6. So are they negotiating again to where it's maybe 12 instead of for the year, or maybe 11 instead of for the year?
And
I don't know.
And the backstory is the NFL and the Players Association negotiated to have this independent judge kind of be the decision maker. So Goodell would kind of get the heat off of him of he's always the one making the decision. And this is her first case in this role. And she only drops a 6-game suspension when everybody that I've heard says that, 6 is just too light.
Well, and she went on precedent like we were just listing there and used that. So she was in a difficult spot as it was, but this is what the appeal process is there for. Yep. If either side doesn't feel like it's just, then that's what they would do. You can't tell me if she had hammered a year-long suspension that Desean Watson wouldn't have exercised the same appeal to say it needs to be less. Right. It needs to be 8 or it needs to be 6. So the NFL, with all the attention on this and 30 accusers, they want it to be more. It will take a little while to figure out, is it going to be more? And obviously, for the purposes of what we were just talking about, Buccaneers play Cleveland, Thanksgiving weekend. And now let's see, is DeShaun Watson back by then or not back by then? And even crazier, I keep saying this, he's available to play in the preseason. Suspended players are still available to practice with their team and play in the preseason and then begin the suspension when the season begins. So it's bizarre world.
I also saw, let's say the suspension was only 6 games. He has to be away from the entire organization for 3 weeks. But in week 4, he can come back and start practicing for 3 weeks to amp up to play in week 7 if it stays at 6 games.
So is that really a suspension at that point? If you're able to practice, just not playing the games, that's a bit crazy.
And here's the other thing.
We'll see.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. If you're the Cleveland Browns and you're the 49ers, if he ends up getting more than 6 games, let's say he gets 12 to 6 or a full year, do the Browns get back into the Jimmy Garoppolo sweepstakes if this gets changed to a or are they really going to go with Jacoby Brissett for the whole run?
It's a good point. And Brissett has some experience playing in a couple of places, including Indianapolis and Miami, previously in New England too, by the way. But I think it's a great point because Garoppolo's on the outs with San Francisco. Yep. What do they do? It's a fascinating, evolving soap opera. Last chapter's not written as of yet.
No doubt. All right, give the fans a quick update of the Buccaneer preseason schedule, radio-wise and locally. If you're in the Bay Area or the state of Florida, tell us where we can find the Buccaneer preseason.
So you can check it out. Buccaneers flagship is 98 Rock in the Tampa Bay area. You can also hear that on various affiliates. It's on 95. I believe 95.7 in Orlando, the sports station in Orlando. But anyway, you can find a list on Buccaneers.com. You can also hear us through the different platforms like SiriusXM and TuneIn to hear the NFL broadcasts of Mean Gene Deckerhoff, who is about to enter season 34 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the radio. Dave Moore, our radio analyst, is about to enter season 16 for him. I will enter season 18 on the game broadcast on the sideline. I have been associated on and off with the Buccaneer Radio Network for 23 seasons. God, I'm old. But anyway, that's how you find us through the Buccaneers media, and the preseason begins with the Miami Dolphins at home. And you have that whole backdrop with the Stephen Ross stuff and the Dolphins tampering with Tom Brady and tampering with Sean Payton. And the first preseason game is Dolphins-Buccaneers. Although Todd Bowles, the new coach of the Bucs, did announce Brady's not going to play in that first game with the Miami Dolphins. They're going to hold him out for that first game. But how fascinating is that for the preseason opener?
And when you're at Raymond James Stadium, now are you still going with the khaki pants this year on the sideline?
Khaki pants have been like a trademark. My twins, when they were very little, would always look for daddy's khaki pants. The problem is everybody else is in khaki pants when they were looking for those. But yes, I will have the khakis. You've seen me. You've seen my act on the sideline with the Buccaneers shirt and the khaki pants. So we'll be ready. We will be ready for Buccaneer football in year 3 of Tom Brady and what's going to happen. I mean, we've said this before on your show, and I've said this a bunch of places. These were the 2 best back-to-back seasons the Buccaneers have ever had, with a Super Bowl win followed by a 13-win division-winning season where you won a playoff game. Yep. Can it be 3 ultra-successful seasons in a row? We're about to find out.
And remember, folks, we've been doing some NFL previews. We've already previewed the AFC, NFC East. We're going to be previewing the AFC, NFC North next week with David Moulton. We're going to have a AFC, NFC West preview with Tyler Jones, who's out in the Midwest covering that market as well. And we're also going to hit the AFC, NFC South. So episodes as we get through August, we're going to be hitting previews on these divisions.
Love it.
College football previews. So give the audience one more rundown, all the different podcasts we're going to have coming up in the fall.
Well, we got all kinds of craziness. Again, find me at Buck Sideline Guy, BUC, Buck Sideline Guy. Also, the 3 Dog Thursday podcast. We talk underdogs, college football in the NFL. We have fun with underdog predictions. There's big stuff coming with 3 Dog Thursday. So stand by for that in a bit. And I love what you're doing on Powers on Sports. Are we going to share something with the audience here? Stay tuned stay tuned, because if you're a college football fan, we're going to have a fantastic podcast feed for college football fans that's coming, called College Football Coast to Coast. Real original name, but it is easy to keep track of everything going on in college football from a bunch of various voices with insight and analysis. College Football Coast to Coast. You'll hear more about that as August turns to September and the college season gets here. Cannot wait. Will the Florida teams in the state be better?
Yeah.
Is it an Alabama coronation? Is it Alabama and Ohio State all the way? Does somebody else mess that up here out of the variety of Georgia or Michigan or Oklahoma or on and on, or USC with Lincoln Riley? What's going to happen? There's so much college football every which direction. So we're anxious. We're anxious for the seasons to come up. And if you're interested in boxing, there's a couple of prominent fights coming in August and September. Big Fight Weekend. Big Fight Weekend is the website. Big Fight Weekend is the podcast feed. Lots on the fights. Heavyweight title fight later in August for Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua of England. And then Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin will fight for a third time in September. So the boxing is at Big Fight Weekend. Again, I got many, many hats. Probably too many hats, but that's better than not having enough hats, Jason Powers.
That's true. 2 points. I'll get us out of here. Give a shout out to the Lars Tate family. Lars Tate, a former Buccaneer running back, passed away kind of unexpectedly in the last couple of days.
Yes.
He played for the Bucs back in the late 80s. He was a tailback from Georgia, had a really good career at Georgia, played in the NFL 4 or 5 years. He passed away. And then last question, the big question of the day. Your 2 teenage daughters are heading to high school next week. Have you and Mama had the chat about, is that all the T's crossed and the I's dotted for that?
I don't know. I don't know who's really ready. We're going to find out. Got to get our game faces on. We're stepping up into the big time. They're going from the big fish as middle schoolers, as 8th graders, and being the oldest students on the campus to right back being the youngest. And my Lord, here we go with boys. I'm not ready for that. Driving.
Friday night football,
all kinds of things. And that's your world too, because you work the Friday night games officiating as well. Yeah. All right, so we're anxious for all of this to begin, because all over the Tampa Bay area, school is starting shortly. And you're right, my 2 are about to, I cannot believe I'm verbalizing my 2 about to be high schoolers. Jason Powers.
Right. You got it. All right, folks, appreciate you finding us. Again, JPO Sports is the Twitter handle. We'd love to hear your comments, suggestions. You got some feedback, we'd love to hear it. Remember, next week we will have David Moulton, the new partner. He's partners with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, working for ESPN Monday Night Football. He's going to help us preview the AFC and NFC North. He also works CBS Saturday, the SEC on CBS, works with Brad Nessler and Danielson. So you'll see a ton of David Moulton. I know you know David a little bit. So check out that, folks, and we will see you next time on the Powers on Sports podcast. Have a great weekend.